I'm calling this talk Grief and Gratitude. And the reason for that is that November is generally considered, in some circles, gratitude month, I think because of Thanksgiving and the idea of giving thanks. Um, and I tend to always give a talk around gratitude in November, but I didn't this year. And so I was reflecting on that, but then I was also reflecting on the grief that's also happening right now in our world. And I looked at my notes because I know I had given a talk on gratitude and grief, and I found out that I had given one a year ago, like the last week in November a year ago, about grief and gratitude. So I have pulled out my notes and I looked at them, and yeah, I talked about gratitude, but I also was looking at the list of things that are going on in the world that are challenging to this idea of being grateful or being joyful. And I was looking at this list, and it's really quite sad because it's the revolution in Iran, which is still happening, the Ukraine, which is still happening, the mass shootings that happen daily, and the rise of fascism and authoritarianism, and the havoc wreaked by climate change, and then we have our personal challenges. Each of us have a life that we're living with its challenges. And then my brother passed away just over 2 weeks ago, so I've got that grief that's kind of hanging out, coming and going. And so it can feel, and then of course there's the war this year with Israel and Gaza and the horror that we see with that. And it can feel so overwhelming and so daunting, and as if there is no way out. And there tends to be, or there can be, a sadness that hangs out. And there seems to be this, there's this idea of gratitude versus grief. And it's as if there's a binary that we have. There's a binary aspect that we can be either happy or grateful or sad, but they can't exist at the same time. And we can get stuck on that, but it's really, I think, helpful to let it go because it's not true. If we're really mindful, and if we're really paying attention, and if we're really open to the reality of our experience of what's actually happening, not what we think is happening, we can see that there is this capacity to be both sad and experiencing grief and to be grateful. Really important to begin to pay attention to that. And Larry Ward, a teacher I love, who I've talked about many times, he had a quote that said, "Receive your suffering with your whole body, not just your intellectual thought. Embrace the sorrow and your joy, but don't drown in your suffering." And I think that's a really important point, that we tend to, if we get into this place of sadness or grief, that we can feel subsumed by it. And in the Brahma Viharas, around compassion, the Buddha talked about, being compassionate, but not drowning in it. Or that's the teaching of that compassion. It's like we're not overwhelmed by it. We have this equanimity. We have this balance to be able to hold it without being knocked over by it. That's what I was pointing to in when I was talking about the meditation and the factors of awakening. There's this equanimity which gives us the capacity to be with everything. And so it's important to remember that and to pay attention. Although sometimes it's much easier to be miserable, we get into these habits of mind. And we keep coming back, especially in a lot of the Buddhist teachings and Dharma talks. It's a lot about dukkha, because dukkha is, we have to recognize that there is dukkha. And so we kind of focus on that, but we have to remember that there's something else. And when we get stuck in that, I know we get stuck sometimes. I think it was Brene Brown. It is Brene Brown who talked about foreboding joy. Sometimes we don't allow the pleasant in, or the we're afraid to let go of the discomfort because if we allow happiness in, we know it's going to end and we don't have to deal with that, you know? So there's that barrier to allowing ourselves to feel joy or feel ease in a time of difficulty. And then sometimes there's this idea that with all this other stuff going on in the world, how can I be grateful? You know, how dare I be grateful? Um, and we get into that judgment around ourselves. However, it's absolutely necessary to be present for what is here, to be present, to be open to the flavor of gratitude, to be open to the flavor of ease and joy when it's present. You know, the First Noble Truth talks about dukkha, talks about there is death, there is loss. It's part of how we exist. It's part of the human condition. So to not have it, you know, be this thing on a pedestal, but to allow it to be part and parcel of what we experience at any given moment. Because you can have a moment of great sorrow followed practically immediately by a moment of great joy if you're paying attention and not lost in the story of where you are or what did happen or what should happen or what won't happen or all those things, just really being present, that the coming and the going of the emotions. It's really powerful when you can just be with that curiosity, that investigation. What's happening right now? And Roshi Joan Halifax talks about wise hope. And she talks how we see things how they are, but we also understand our ability to transform it. We're not doomed to or fated to experience a certain thing. We remain rooted in reality. So there's this clarity, there's this hope, there's this, oh yeah, there is this equanimity, this balance. There's the discomfort and then there's the ease. And so that's the invitation of mindfulness, to A, open to the one thing, but B, to cultivate the other. And I think the cultivation of gratitude is really powerful. It has a really beneficial impact on the brain. And Rick Hansen, who I talk about a lot, he talks about being with suffering and being with loss and being with grief, to be with what's there, but also when something is enjoyable, to be with that, you know, to increase the gratitude, to take a few moments to, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you're having the same thing. The weather has been glorious and the sky has been glorious and the sunrises have been beautiful and the sunsets have been just stunning. I really appreciate this time of year because the sky is clear and the air is fresh and it's just, and the leaves on the trees have just been really beautiful. So to take that and just feel that joy or feel that gratitude, it has a beneficial impact on the brain. And it doesn't mean we don't care about what's going on in the world, but we can be with what's going on in the world and also be grateful. I used to think, I used to, I used to think, I used to like go gratitude. I was so dismissive of gratitude. Oh my gosh, I was just so annoying and awful. But you know, let me see, can't you even be grateful for, you know, the fact that you can breathe? And I'm like, really, really? And it's like, you know, people who can't breathe would really appreciate being able to breathe. I mean, I tripped last week and I landed hard on my knee and I can't really go up and down stairs except that little, you know, one at a time. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm grateful nothing worse happened. But you know, yeah, it's we just get so dismissive, we get so stuck in I, me, and my, instead of being grateful for everything we have. Thich Nhat Hanh's really good about that when his invitation to interbeing, and when we eat. If it were left up to me, I would starve to death. I'm so dependent on so many other people for everything I put in my mouth. the people, the farmers who grow the food, and the truckers, and the people who process it and package it, and the people at the store where I go and I buy it, and all those things. So grateful. We're so connected. So it's really important to recognize that and be willing to cultivate that. And gratitude is the antidote to negative mind states, especially if we're stuck in them. We get so locked into them. Like I was locked into that dismissiveness of gratitude, or we're locked into, no, this is terrible. This is bad. This is awful. How could, and it's like, no, can you actually be here now? Be here now. There can be grief, and there can also be gratitude. It's not a binary, it's not an either or. It's a, yeah, they can both be true, but we have to be paying attention. We have to be mindful. We have to be in awareness. And there's a woman, Sonia Lyubomirsky, who did some research on happiness, and she talked about gratitude, and she mentioned some of the benefits of it. And she says it helps us savor positive life experiences. It bolsters our self-worth and our self-esteem, and it helps us cope with stress and trauma. It strengthens relationships. It inhibits the comparing mind, and it diminishes negative emotions. And it keeps us from taking joy for granted, which thus extends joy. So it really is beneficial. And Rick Hansen talks about how it helps to rewire the brain in a more beneficial way. So it's really important. So to expand gratitude, can you make it an intentional practice? No? Can you make it intentional? I was talking about this in my class last night, and someone was sharing that before she gets out of bed in the morning, she comes up with 5 things she's grateful for. And I know a lot of folks who do gratitude lists every day, and they share them with each other. And it's again, if you come from where I came from, it was like, really? But it's actually, try it. I mean, it's a softening of our hearts. It's a releasing of our fixed views. It's a letting go and a getting in touch with. So be intentional about your gratitude. And it's not about getting rid of difficulties. It's not that at all. It doesn't say we have to, we're in this Pollyanna kind of world. It's acknowledging the reality of existence. It's acknowledging it, but also recognizing that we can be grateful. So take some time with your gratitude. That's why I always do a gratitude practice, a little few moments of gratitude at the end of meditation, because it does have a beneficial aspect, because sometimes we forget to be grateful. And I had somebody say to me many years ago, it's pretty impossible to both grumble and be grateful. Because if you're grumbling, it's hard to be grateful. And if you're grateful, it's hard to grumble. And I think to have that generosity of spirit, gratitude fits right in with that. It's kind of a heart practice. I don't remember, I don't want to make it up. Sharon Salzberg might talk about gratitude in Loving Kindness, the book, and she might not. But I know she talks about generosity, so maybe she doesn't talk about gratitude. But gratitude is I think of it as a heart practice, because it is opening our heart to the present moment. And when you're grateful, don't censor yourself. It's so easy to judge. We get into that judging mind. Oh no, I should, blah, blah, blah. No, if you're grateful for it, that's not good enough or whatever. I'm always grateful for my cats. They're so sweet. I'm always grateful for the practice, because I don't know where I'd be without it. And, so be fully with these wholesome mind states. And be gentle with yourself. Take care of yourself with skillful means. Don't, being with the discomfort, being with the grief, allow it to be there, but really be gentle with yourself. I've known people who go, I have to be with this, and just bear down. That is not, let there be a softness to your practice. Let there be a softness to how you hold your experience. And if you need to back up a little bit and take it easy, do that too. And I saw this quote this week. I don't know who this person is, Frances Ward Weller. I think she's a poet, but this quote, she said, "The work of the mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and to be stretched large by them. How much sorrow can I hold? That's how much gratitude I can give. If I only carry grief, I'll bend towards cynicism and despair. If I have only gratitude, I'll become saccharine and won't develop much compassion for other people's suffering. Grief keeps the heart fluid and soft, which helps make compassion possible." I think that's really beautiful. Grief keeps the heart fluid and soft, which makes compassion possible. And then when we have, we have the grief, we have the compassion, and we also have the gratitude. Because it takes both, because you've met those people who everything's always fine, everything's great, everything's lovely, and there's something that's out of touch because they're not acknowledging the dukkha. And so to be able to hold both is the work of a mature person. Is the work of a mind that's moving towards equanimity, that's beginning to wake up, that's developing this wise heart, this wisdom and compassion. So remembering that it's not a binary. It's not an either or. I can have this, but I can't have that. To allow the heart to be expansive and open and greet whatever is present. We can be with the grief that's in front of us. How can we not feel it when we see what's going on in the world? When we just see the loss in our own lives and the sadness. A couple of weeks ago, I wrote this little thing, and I think I wrote it as much for me as for anything else. And it's like, allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to breathe and let your heart be touched. We have to allow ourselves to feel those 10,000 joys and those 10,000 sorrows. So be open to the grief that's here and be open to the gratitude that also exists. And watch the tendency to get lost in the stories, which is not necessarily productive. Be present, be compassionate, be aware. Oh. And I guess I have a really short Dharma talk today. But November was gratitude month, and I really have come to love gratitude, and I'm so grateful for it, and I'm so grateful for the ability to feel today, because for a long time I just did not want to feel, and because I was terrified of feeling. Terrified of grief, terrified of difficult emotions. I wanted only the good stuff, only the joy, only the pleasant, only the praise, and none of the other stuff. But you don't get that. And that's what the Buddha said is the root of our discomfort, is when we only want the good stuff. It's craving the sensual pleasure all the time. That's the continual cycle of dukkha and rebirth, samsara, over and over and over again, chasing. But if we can still ourselves, still the mind, and be open to whatever shows up with this open-heartedness, with this kindness, with this compassion, and this gratitude, for the breath we take, for whatever it is we can be grateful for. We can all be grateful for at least one thing a day. I think it's so important. And so I'm really grateful for that ability to feel. I'm really grateful for the humanity that was so scary, the human condition that was so scary for so many years. So I think that's all I have, my friends. So I really appreciate your patience and your generosity of spirit and listening. And would love to hear any thoughts, any sharing, any questions about how you work with your grief and your gratitude. So thank you again. So. Thank you again, my friends, and remembering that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good week. I'll see you next time. Thanks all.